I'm streaming. Seems to be working. Yeah, great. Looks like it's working today. Of course, it looked like it was working yesterday, and then I realized it wasn't, but I'm watching the stream in another computer here, and it is showing up, so it looks like I'm working. So I'm going to go ahead and take a few moments here to get settled and see if anyone comes online with me. I'll go ahead and put the word out on Twitter in case anyone on Twitter wants to follow this today. Okay. Well, just tweeted about it, so maybe someone on Twitter is interested and wants to click in and see what's going on. Today I'm going to be talking about NaNoGenMo, as you can see from the title up here, up there. I'm going to be talking about NaNoGenMo. And I've got a bunch of things to talk about. This is kind of a lecture, but kind of just me clicking through a bunch of stuff and talking about things that I'm interested in and excited about and want to talk about with NaNoGenMo. So I've got a lot of things to get through here. I will get started into some real content shortly, but I'll give people a moment to get online if they are going to be joining. Check this out. I got this app on my phone today. It's a DJ Horn app. I got it because my oldest two kids, 11 and 9, they don't wake up in the morning at a reasonable time, and so I thought a DJ air horn would be the best way to wake them up. So I walked in there this morning and I was like, because it's annoying, but I figure if as a father, if I'm not spending at least part of my day annoying and or embarrassing my kids, then it's an opportunity missed. So yeah, I also thought it could be a fun signature sound for my stream. Whenever I do something cool or explain something, I could just hit the button, but probably not. I don't know how loud that is on the microphone. I don't want to overwhelm anyone's headphones, so I'm gonna knock it off. All right, well, it looks like I got one viewer. Great. Of course, this will be archived, so you can watch it later. And I'll put it on, it'll be archived here on Twitch, but I'll put it on YouTube as well. Okay, great. Well, one viewer is enough, as long as there's someone out there. Now, if you're, whoever you are, if you have a question or comment while I'm streaming, hey, 2 viewers, great. Again, whoever you are, if you have a question or comment while I'm rambling about things, you can use the chat in Twitch to send me a question, or if you're in my class and you have our Discord open, you can send me a question there or a comment there if you'd like to. Okay, so let's get into it. NaNoGenMo is, I'm talking about NaNoGenMo because in my creative coding class, what you're doing this week, your second project this week, which is hard to imagine. Normally these projects take 2 or 3 weeks each. We're trying to do them in 2 or 3 days each for the summer class. So I know you definitely have your work cut out for you, but I'm going to help. Anyway, NaNoGenMo is an event that happens every November, and in my creative coding class, the last couple times I've taught the class, it was a fall semester, so I actually had students participate if they wanted to in the real NaNoGenMo events, and several of them have, and that's been pretty cool to see. But we're not doing that now because it's not November, but we're kind of having November and July for my class. They're going to be participating in NaNoGenMo by producing their own and generating their own novels. So I have a lot of things pulled up here. Like I said, let me switch my scene over here to start kind of talking through it. I changed my background, by the way, because I was wearing a black shirt again, and I thought, I don't want to disappear into the background like I feel like I did the other day. So it's green now, but it actually kind of matches the actual green screen behind me, but it's still being chroma keyed out. So NaNoGenMo is an acronym. It stands for National Novel Generation Month. The national part there is just based on the origin of this, which is NaNoWriMo, or Nano, I guess it's, I'm never sure if it's NaNoWriMo or NaNoRimo. I've heard both, but I feel like Rye makes more sense because it's National Novel Writing Month. And this is an event many people have participated in, perhaps you have. It's where writers decide they're going to write a novel from beginning to end during the month of November, and there's this whole organization, and like you can track your progress, and there's like a scoreboard, and there's a whole way to make a game out of it. And a lot of people really enjoy doing that. I think that for many writers, I think they find that it's good practice. It's a good sort of challenge to set for yourself. Even if you don't produce a high quality novel by the end of the month, it's a good exercise and it's good practice. My daughter has attempted it, and she didn't complete it. She was trying to write a short story. She didn't complete it, but still, that's 5 or 6 pages of writing that she wouldn't have had otherwise, and it was good practice for her. So it's a good thing to do, and it's enjoyable. Well, in 2013, where's my tab? There it is. 2013, Darius Kazemi, the maker of many Twitter bots and interesting internet things, put this tweet out and said, "Hey, who wants to join me in NaNoGenMo? Spend the month writing code that generates a 50,000 word novel. Share the novel and the code at the end." And that's the tweet that kicked it off, and it contains the entire rule set for NaNoGenMo, and that's pretty much all we needed. So lots of people replied and said, "Hey, this sounds like a good idea." 146 people, I guess, replied to that tweet about it, and it got started. The place that it lives is on GitHub, and this is the 2019 edition. It initially started on Darius's repository, so it was just Darius K /NaNoGenMo, and this is a GitHub repository that's being used in a slightly different way than most GitHub repositories. Mostly on GitHub you share code, and then when people work with your code and have a problem with it or a suggestion, they post what's called an issue, and they say, "Here's something that can you help me with, or I want you to look at, or whatever." So this is different in that issues posted on the NaNoGenMo project are more like forum posts where people are posting their novel, like they're posting what they've completed or what they're working on. And once they've completed the 50,000 word threshold, then an administrator, Darius, or there's a couple more administrators now, Hugo and Martin, I think, will tag something with completed, and that's it. And this is an open forum, so people can comment on and tweak and respond to each other's code. And the one way to get to know NaNoGenMo is simply to kind of click through these completed ones and see what's in there. There's a lot now. This is 2013. This was the first year that it was run, and then if you look at the main page, it always links to the next year. So you can go from 2013 to 2014, 2015, 16, 17, and then eventually, if you notice, it becomes its own repository, and so it's now just NaNoGenMo, and you can just go to github.com/NaNoGenMo, or sorry, not repository, it's its own account. So you can go here and see it year by year, including 2019, which is the most recent year. And there are a lot of novels that have been produced this way. I actually have some data about how many novels were produced each year, and I'll show you that in a moment. But I wanted to show you another really good way to get into and start learning about NaNoGenMo. So last year, back in the fall, I worked with 3 students. So I taught creative coding in the fall, but 3 of those students in that class joined me with an extra on an extra project. They got an extra credit, essentially, a 1 credit hour of what's called undergraduate research credit, working with me to produce a database of commentary and data about NaNoGenMo, and they did a lot of great work, and I want to show you some of that work in this video. I'm also pretty excited about getting that database actually published and made visible so you can really explore their work that they did. But one of those students, Sandra, also did an additional project where she made her own intro to NaNoGenMo website. She did this as an assignment for another class, but it's a great intro. She talks about the background with Darius Kazemi here, participation rules, and then also talks about some of the ideas that we as a group were talking about in terms of the value of this kind of project. Like, what is NaNoGenMo? Why is it interesting? We had actually planned on doing this as a conference paper, but that conference got canceled because of COVID-19, so we weren't able to do that. So this is kind of a leftover from that, but it's really good because what Sandra's done here, she talks about our project that we worked on, the database, and I'll show you that in a moment. But she also does a nice job of introducing NaNoGenMo by pulling out some key examples. So Sandra was really interested in word art, for example. This is actually an excerpt of her work, ASCII Aquarium, and I think really one of the most interesting contributions to 2019's NaNoGenMo. It's a book, but each page in the book is a frame of a video converted into ASCII art. So you can like read the book, but you're actually just, if you scroll quickly through the book, you can create basically an animated GIF of ASCII art like you see here. It's really fascinating. She's also pulling out and featuring a couple of other kind of visually oriented books that people have generated with code. So Liza Daly does a lot of really great and really impressive visual works for NaNoGenMo, and so that's some examples there. Shadows was a book of concrete poetry. And these are very, I think, work-intensive approaches. So if you're thinking about NaNoGenMo for the first time, this is probably not the first project that you will do, but it's something that you can think about in the future maybe, or maybe you can start with it. It really doesn't, it's hard to say what would work. These are works where there's some significant visual aspect to it. So this is my work, The Several Houses of Brian, Spencer, Liam, Victoria, Braden, Vincent, and Alex. This is a children's book that I created and illustrated in code. So it's a Python script that generates this book and then illustrates it using imagery from the Noun project and Flickr. And I can say more about how this is built, but I don't want to make this whole thing about me. But the basic idea is that it's a parody of This Is the House That Jack Built, which is a children's book or nursery rhyme or folktale. But this is one that can essentially go on indefinitely by using relationships between objects as described in ConceptNet. So ConceptNet, I'll just show you real quick. ConceptNet is a taxonomy. It's a web-based thing, but there's also an API, so you can address it in code and get different relationships within it, where you can get things that relate to other things and how they relate to each other. So for the word house, you can find things that are located at house and things that house has and things that are parts of house. And so if you want to construct a reasonable sentence or expression based on things that make sense, you could say that you could construct something by finding out like what is a use of house, and you can construct a sentence based on that and it would make sense. ConceptNet, I believe Darius Kazemi also uses this for his roof slapping bot on Twitter. So that's really all I did, and I was able to kind of crawl through that and construct essentially infinite chains of relationships between things, and it makes sense. It's pretty funny to read, I think, so I like it a lot. Simulations are a little harder to explain, I think, but this is where you have some different agents or different objects in code that have different properties and they interact with each other, and then as they run, you record the results of their interactions, and that becomes the novel. So these are a bit harder to explain, but also pretty readable and pretty entertaining in many cases. And then prose, this is just different examples of prose generation. I would say this is poetry actually, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. So these are just a couple of high-level examples and to kind of pull out the kinds of things that people have done. Let me get into a little bit more with, here's the original tweet. Let me get into, let me show you some statistics. Okay, so this is a slideshow from a presentation I gave at the Electronic Literature Conference in 2018 about NaNoGenMo. And I think I'll just go through a few of these slides because I hope they're interesting, but also they're also out of date. I do have the data for 2018 and I'm working on 2019, but I haven't put them in graph form yet. So what this is showing is the number of participants in NaNoGenMo up through 2017. And you can see it definitely increased. 2014 was the biggest year, both in terms of participants and novels generated. Although I haven't finished 2019 yet, but it's going to be a close second, if not possibly the most prolific year. 2018 was also very good, very high, so it's good. Lots and lots of novels. Let me show you a couple of other numbers. Like up through 2018, we had at that point. Including 2017's year, that was around 400 novels at that point, and 207 unique individuals have participated. Those numbers are much higher now. it's close to 600 novels, if not more than 600, although, like I said, I'm still working on 2019. But you can see how many novels tend to be completed and kind of how many words they go. The basic requirement of having a novel that's at least 50,000 words means that most of them are around 50,000 words, but some are going to be much, much longer. Some are shorter, but technically counts, or somebody, Hugo or Martin or whoever decided it counts. There is kind of a convention or a rule of thumb that an image counts as 1,000 words. So some books are actually purely images, and so those count, but they're going to throw off the average word count, obviously, if they don't literally have words in them. Okay, so this is a presentation where I was talking about distant reading, and so I think distant reading sometimes can be useful to try to understand a large set of things, and that's what we're talking about here. At this point, it's 399 novels and many more by now. So I need to update these visualizations, but I mean, visualizations really just scratch the surface, and they just give you an idea of what's below the surface. Not much, right? So this is just a word cloud, right? So this is a word cloud of all of the books generated up through 2017, and a few things stand out if you look at it. This one over here on the right, the word cloud, that's including stop words, so common words like the, and, of, to, that. And as you can see, that kind of word cloud isn't particularly helpful because you can't actually see most of the interesting words. But the one on the left you can see has some pretty interesting words that stand out. The word buffalo, the word meow and mew stand out quite a bit. Word shows up a lot. I entered story, right? So these are giving us a sense of what might be in there. In fact, I can tell you a couple of these. At least two different, I think three actually, now that I'm thinking of it, individuals have done some variation of the buffalo joke or meme or whatever you want to call it, which is a linguistic phenomenon whereby it is technically a grammatically correct sentence if you say buffalo, 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 buffalo. It's kind of hard to understand unless you sort of think about it structurally like that, but it technically is a grammatically correct sentence. So some people just use that as do that sentence a whole bunch of times until you get to 50,000 words, and then that's your novel. So that's why the word buffalo shows up a lot here. Hey, I'm in the middle of something. Oh, okay. So the other one, meow and mew, that is from, well, we'll take a look at that, but that's a book called 50,000 meows. There's actually several books that use a particular schema to transform language into human language into cat language. So I'll show you those in a moment when I get into the database. So yeah, there's a closer look at that one. All right, so when you think about the kinds of things you can know about a text by using a computer, in other words, things that you can put a text into and try to find out something out about it, reading level analysis is one of the things that you can do, and this is a formula that calculates the average or the predicted reading level or reading grade level of a book. So you put a book into it, and then you get a score for what grade level it's supposed to be. I was trying to remember when my daughter was in elementary school, they had this, what was it called? Advanced Reader? It was an acronym. I can't remember what it was now, but it was, you would get certain points for books. And so you would get a book and you would have a certain point value for it. And that point value was similar to this, which is a calculation of things like average word length and vocabulary density and overall length or something like that. And that was just a formula that was used to generate a score for that book. And it's just mathematical. It's not really based on any ideas from the book. It's just literally how long is it and how big are the words. So I ran all of the books I had through 2017 through reading level analysis. And this graph isn't particularly helpful because, as you can see, or you can't really see, several novels ended up with a predicted reading grade level of 20,000 or higher. So you would need to be in 20,000th grade to read some of these books. And for one, you needed to be in 33,000th grade in order to actually approach it. I have a better graph in a moment, but I wanted you to see the way that this particular analysis really fails on many of the books that are produced this way. Not all, though, and really just a small number. So these are some examples of the very, very high reading level books. This is Weaver by Matt Schneider. Sorry about the typo, Matt. But one of the things that one of the factors that helps a formula calculate a grade level for a book is the average sentence length. And I'm pretty sure this is a book that had no punctuation. So it thought of the whole thing as one sentence. So it's, of course, going to have a very, very high average sentence length, but a relatively low vocabulary density, I think. So it ends up kind of 20,000. This is one where these are the words. So, I mean, it just uses the rectangle instead of words. So what's the reading level of that? I don't know. I mean, that's hard to say. This was, and then Average Novel by Alison Parrish. This is the one that was, I believe, was the 33,000th one. You can see how it's a lot of, the same words and very low vocabulary density, but a very, very high reading level because of the lack of punctuation. Actually, come to think of it, I think that one was 20,000. I think WeVerb was 33,000, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look at it. Okay, so this is a better look at the reading level, and this just chops off anything past 18th grade, just, because it's kind of meaningless, as we see there. And I think this is actually really interesting because there's a definite convergence or a definite sense in which middle to high school grades in American grade level systems, that tends to be the most popular reading level for these. Dan, no, you cannot ask me something while I'm doing a video, okay? I'll be done in a little while. I'm the only parent home right now, so I'm the one who gets the questions. So I'm making a good point here, I hope. I think this is really interesting because if you look at the works that people produce for NaNoGenMo, many of them are based on existing novels. And I think that's really interesting because if you put the question of, think of a novel off the top of your head, it turns out that many people think of the same 4, 5, or 6 novels: Moby Dick, Pride and Prejudice, and several others, but those two are the big ones. And if you calculate their reading level, that's kind of where they are, middle and high school. And those are the environments where many of us read complex novels for the first time, and so they make a strong impression on us. Or maybe you haven't read many novels since then, and so then when you think of novels, you think of things you read in middle school and early high school. And Frankenstein's another one. And these show up a lot here, and I think that the reading level convergence around that grade level is kind of proof of that tendency that many people have when they think about a novel. They think of a novel as, like a literary novel, as a middle school and high school kind of experience, and that the outcome reading level here, I think, confirms that. There's a dip around 7th grade, and I don't know why, but 6th through 8th grade are certainly very popular. All right, so there's other things you can do. I did some pretty crude, stylometrics on these books, and I've been told that this was kind of crude later, but it works for me anyway. Using characteristic curves of composition to understand vocabulary patterns by different authors. So I've got Pride and Prejudice, the actual Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I've got Moby Dick. I've got Shakespeare's complete works here. These are their characteristic curves of composition. And then I've got different books that people have put in NaNoGenMo. And so one thing that I thought you could do is you could take one of these curves and then compare novels to their curve and then determine how close to Pride and Prejudice is any given novel. And you can kind of calculate a Pride and Prejudiceness and a Moby Dickishness. And then you can graph those numbers and kind of see which books ended up closer or farther away from that. So this is a table of Pride and Prejudiceness. Yeah, Pride and Prejudiceness of different books, calculated by how close their curve of composition matches Pride and Prejudice's curve of composition. Curve of composition is just given your most favorite, it just graphs your most favorite words basically, and how popular they are relative to the next most popular word, and so on. It doesn't actually do any kind of semantic analysis. So just as confirmation, these are the books highlighted in yellow. These are the ones that actually are stated to be based on Pride and Prejudice, and so this is just kind of confirming that within, there's some error here, but for the most part, the books that said they were about Pride and Prejudice ended up matching pretty closely to Pride and Prejudice's characteristic curve of composition, at least for these, for the top scoring ones. What I was hoping to find out is that there might be other books that did not acknowledge Pride and Prejudice as a source, and yet the characteristic curve of composition demonstrated that, in fact, they were based on that, based on Pride and Prejudice. I have not totally figured that out, but I believe it is the case that there are some here that I did not expect to be similar to Pride and Prejudice, and yet they ended up being that way. The reasons why are kind of can be speculated about. And in some cases, a lot of times authors don't acknowledge their sources or explain why, but see, in some cases you do have to look through the code. So in this case, this is All My Smooth Body by Nick Montfort, and you can see that, yes, indeed, it does reference a file called Shakespeare.txt, and so pretty clearly that's that's Shakespeare. So that's that's his source of inspiration. So we can calculate a Shakespeare-ness score for his books and probably end up with a pretty high score. All right, still got one viewer, so whoever you are, thanks for watching. It could be me actually because I've got this pulled up here. I don't know how this is counted, but that's all right. This is all being recorded anyway for posterity. So this is a graph where I put the Austin-ness and the Melville-ness against each other, and you end up with a kind of a plot of where books fall on these. And this plot actually has, you can actually hover over these and see the name of the different books. The least like either was the Buffalo, etc. Also the redacted books are way out of line, and a few other kind of really unusual ones. And the ones that are in this region are going to be the ones that are really unusual in terms of their composition, or things that are not really even prose. And so that's why they ended up being pretty far from both Melville or Austin. But along this vector down here, along the Pride and Prejudice to Moby Dick kind of line, I think that's an interesting vector to put it on. I think yeah, I think I'd probably like to regenerate this graph and then put that on a, like rotate that so that you could see the Austin-ness and Melville-ness more exactly, like how a book moves between those two, as opposed to vertically away from either of them. Okay, so that's enough of that slideshow. Let me show you something that I produced last year, and then the students helped me work on. This is NaNoGenMo Cat. I couldn't think of a better name for it, but it's a catalog, and it's meant to make it possible for you to explore NaNoGenMo a little bit more easily than going through it issue by issue in GitHub. And what I've got here is it's all metadata, so the books themselves aren't hosted here, but there are links to the books themselves. So if you wanted to look at, remember I showed you the meow was a popular word. If you want to find out what book that comes from, you can just search for it here, and there's a few other things that show up that are related to it. But this is one of the books with the transformation by this is Hugo VK who produced this one, and you can view like sample images from the book to kind of see what it is. And it doesn't really explain it here, but if you go into the issue URL, you can see the explanation that Hugo provided, where what he's done is written some code that will transform English words into meows and mews, and it's pretty funny. And so you can actually kind of read it out loud if you want to. It's kind of also just a funny example of the kind of thing you can do with NaNoGenMo. This was a plum version of the same idea, where it was the different permutations of the word plum instead of meows. I don't know why I don't have a preview of that one, come to think of it. But as you can see, you can do this with any book, and the results are kind of similar, but you can still tell the books apart, which I think is pretty funny. So there's a lot to explore in here. Unfortunately, it's not very, a lot of the interesting part is in the back end, and so I can't really show you that, but it's also not up to date yet. But here's the updated statistics up through 2018 in terms of how many people have participated. And then this is really interesting, I think. This is a pie chart of languages used. Again, this is only up through 2018. A couple of things where I had to kind of guess to calculate these. And for example, I don't know if it's really that significant to have ZSH versus bash as two different things. Ultimately, they're pretty much the same thing. So I don't know. I mean, this does involve a bit of interpretation on my part, but I think you can still see that Python is very much the most popular language by far. The second most is JavaScript, and I think if I remember correctly, I didn't distinguish like client-side JavaScript versus Node.js. I think it's all included in JavaScript. So it's still very popular, but not nearly as popular as Python. Ruby is in there, and Perl, but really nothing is at all competing with Python as far as popularity of languages used. I think if I updated this, I think I have seen quite a bit more Twine and ML5JS, and a couple others have been making kind of a surge, but it's still, I'm pretty sure Python is going to continue to be the dominant language used in NaNoGenMo. So let me show you the kind of thing this is actually part of the backend, but this is the backend that's forthcoming. And so what these students did, Alexander, Christina, and Sandra, they went through and they helped me catalog these books. And so what we have are a lot more, a much richer metadata than you can currently access in the NaNoGenMo cat as it's published. And this is what I'm working on. So things like source materials. So like when I was looking at the characteristic curves of composition, this would be a way to verify a guess, like to say, is this based on the Oz novels? Well, yeah, it is, because as Alexander noted here, it is. So this would help us kind of test our hypotheses and work through it if we were going to try to do that. And they've also provided short descriptions of each book, and so that's going to help the cataloging and make it easier to kind of see what's what. But yeah, there's a lot of really rich explanation and documentation in here, and you can see there's different kinds of things. We also were talking a lot about text generation techniques. So we were trying to understand not just like what language did you use, but like how did you use Python, or how did you use Ruby, or whatever you were using. And there's a little bit of cleanup we need to do in terms of these. In some cases it's guessing, because people who participate in NaNoGenMo aren't always very explicit about what they've done. They just say, here's my novel. And so you kind of have to look at their code and try to understand it and interpret what they're doing. So, this is a bit rough, but I think that's great, because then we can kind of work with it and learn through it. Oh yeah, you see Rita.js. So Rita is a good example of how, yeah, I mean, it's JavaScript, but it's this particular JavaScript library that is helping this work, helping accomplish this work. So I think it's important to acknowledge that for future people who may want to participate. They can see that, okay, here's Rita.js, here's a way to do this, and hopefully come up with some good ideas based on it. Okay, so that's probably all I have to say about the backend kind of things. Again, so if you want to explore this is at nngm.botstudies.org, and I'm working to get it up to date with 2019, and then I'm going to just basically overhaul the entire thing with that data included. But it'll continue to be at this URL of nngm.botstudies.org. I'm using Omega S, by the way, for this site. It's very nice. I like it a lot. Oh yeah, you can see you can browse by creator, right? So this is the kind of thing where I've got lots of metadata here. So if there's a particular creator you're interested in, let's say, let's see, this is by first name, I think, yeah. So, or by username. So if you're interested in Allison Parrish and seeing her work in here, I've got, yeah, 3 so far. She's done quite a bit more, obviously, since then, but yeah, I mean, this is an example of where I need to add more, but some great works here by Allison, so check those out if that's someone you know and you want to see what she's done for NaNoGenMo. Nick Montfort is also very prolific within this community. One of the things that has led to, I think, 2019 having probably maybe even more than 2014 is NaNoGenMo, which is something hashtag Nick Montfort started, where the goal is to write the code that will generate a novel inside of a tweet, like to make it short enough, like make your code as small as possible so that you can tweet the code and then also the novel. Very much a challenge, and I attempted that and I was unsuccessful. So I actually did not end up producing a novel in 2019. I was kind of debating the whole NaNoGenMo thing too, because the idea was to write it entirely in a tweet, but several of the works that people were producing would rely on other things, but so like they would write code that would get some ideas or some content from somewhere else, and I feel like that's cheating a little bit. So I was trying to be a purist and make my code entirely tweetable, but I ended up I wasn't able to produce something that was satisfactory to me, so I did not end up sharing it. But anyway, so that's NaNoGenMo, kind of an introduction to the phenomenon. Now, in my class, I'm asking you all to produce a novel in a couple of days, right? There's lots of different ways you can do this, as you can see from all the different works that are available in the database and on GitHub. And I don't expect you to invent a new way of making a novel or something like that. I mean, if you can, that's great. I think what really distinguishes a work is not the novelty of the technique that you use, but the ideas behind the choices you make as you put it together. So I'm going to make some videos later today with at least 3, maybe 4, if I can get a good AI demonstration together, showing you different ways you can make this work. And let's take a look at one of these that I have so far, and you'll see what I'm talking about. This is a notebook where it's taking you through, actually I have it open already in there, but this is okay too. This is a notebook taking you through the steps of generating a novel and then saving that novel as a PDF. There's a few steps that are kind of unusual, so I wanted to show you them here. And then the middle part is the part where you can do whatever you're doing to make a novel. But there's a couple of first steps and then kind of a final step. Let me show you how this could work. I recommend using this thing called WheezyPrint. It's a module that does a pretty nice job of generating a PDF. And so I recommend it. It's not going to be installed already in your Colab environment, in the notebook environment that we're using. So you need to install it, and installing is different than importing. So you first have to install it and then you import it into your code. So it has to be part of the environment. And to address things in the environment, you have to use this exclamation point notation. So you really just want to run this once. And as you can see, I've already run it for this notebook. So it's telling me that the requirement is already satisfied. When you run it for the first time, you get all that with the progress bars. You may need to run it again if you shut down the runtime and then come back a few days later. You may not. I've had kind of both experiences with it. It's easy to do either way. It's just like if you see something like, if you try to run this cell and it says something like WheezyPrint is not available, or couldn't find this module, or no module named WheezyPrint, then you need to come back here and rerun this one. But if you run this one and everything works, then you should be good. So these are the things I'm importing in this case. I've got Markdown, I'm importing WheezyPrint, and then also random, because random is good to have anyway. And then within WheezyPrint, I'm getting the HTML and the CSS modules within WheezyPrint. So those are all there. I probably don't need line 2 and 4 here, but I'll leave them in there for now. So this is assuming that you're going to generate a novel using Markdown. And if you're not used to Markdown, it does take a bit of explanation. It's not too bad though. I think it's pretty quick. It's something you can learn, I think, pretty quickly. This is an example of Markdown, this particular cell. So if you double click it, if you're editing this notebook, and of course I'll put the link in the description, you can see how to do it, right? I mean, to make something italic, you put 2 underscores, or actually asterisks work as well, like one at the beginning, one at the end. To make something bold, you put 2 on either side. Pretty straightforward. Most of the time though, what you'll need to do are just heading and paragraph formatting. For paragraphs, you don't do anything. You just sort of write your paragraph and then hit enter and then write your next paragraph. And it goes like that. It doesn't indent, like this particular view of it isn't paragraphy. Why did I write it like that? This isn't going to indent paragraphs, but don't worry about indentation. Just let it do what it's going to do. The other thing you can probably want to do are headings, and these are indicated with the hash marks. So for your top level or main title of the book, you probably want to do something like that. For chapters, you probably want to do something like that. So it's 1 hash mark, or an H1. It's the equivalent of an H1 tag in HTML, or 2 hash marks, which is the equivalent of an H2 in HTML. And that's kind of all you need. And I've incorporated that here. This is just a very, very basic novel generating code, and it's written kind of sloppily just to demonstrate what it's doing. Let me show you what it looks like. So if you run it, it just prints the word count, because actually printing the novel is pretty, well, you'll see. It's not great. So it's not really informative to look at. But there it is. It's the word over and over again. So is that interesting? No, not really. Could it be? I mean, it depends on what word you're printing 50,000 times, I guess, but I'm hard pressed. It's hard to think of a word that repeating it this many times would be interesting. But I was trying to scroll up to see a chapter heading. Here's a chapter heading, chapter 9. It's got the 2 hash marks there to indicate that. So you don't need to actually look at it in Markdown mode. I just am doing that here to preview that this is what this generates and what it looks like at this stage, right? So Markdown. Yeah, you know what? I forgot I have already. Yeah, there you go. I have a text generations method subtitle there, or Chiron, for me, so I forgot to switch that over. Not that I'm really getting into methods yet, but this is the repetition method. So I'll put this in a short explanation of how to do this in the text generation page on Canvas. But it's not really what I would recommend unless you've got a really good idea for something to repeat 50,000 times. Of course, you could do phrases, like I've just got the word showing up. You could do phrases, or I don't know, sequences of some sort. I can't really think of what it would be, to be honest. So, but it works functionally, and it does satisfy the requirements of NaNoGenMo and the assignment. It's just maybe not, maybe not the most valuable thing to do. So for this demo, though, all it does, it does generate a novel in Markdown format that we can use for the next steps, which is the main thing I wanted to show you here. So what we need to do next is convert the Markdown novel into HTML. And this is something that we can do with the Markdown module. The Markdown module is installed in the environment, so you just have to import it. That's what I did up here. It just imports, and that's all you got to do. And here it is. And so running it will take that Markdown novel, the one I just printed, and then convert it into an HTML version. We don't need to look at it, but just to prove that it is what we think it is, I'll show you that this is what it looks like with HTML added, basically. So the paragraphs all have the P tag before and after them, and the chapters have the H2 tag before and after them. That's all the formatting we have in this case, but it's there and it's correct, so that's good. All right, then finally we have to do this special line, and this one is using the HTML module from WheezyPrint, and it's passing that HTML string as the content to write into a PDF. So let me run this, see what happens. This does take a couple seconds sometimes because it's got to generate it, then render it, and then save it. And if it works, then it should add this over here. Right, so this is, you can see the name of it, so many words.pdf. Make sure if you do this, make sure you leave this part here, the /content, because that's the location of this area, this folder over here on the left. It's not labeled that way, but that's what it's implied as. So make sure you leave that there and just change this part, and then here it is, so many words.pdf. Let's see if I can view this in the browser. I may not be able to view it in the browser because I'm just on OBS. I'm just using the browser to display things. So I wonder if I can, maybe I can just open this in a tab. Because I did download it a little while ago. But I gotta find it first. And this will be the final thing I cover today, so I can wrap it up here. Yeah, looks like a good stopping point. So if there is someone still watching and you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Otherwise, if you're watching this in the YouTube archive, and if you're one of my students, hopefully you know how to contact me, but if you're not, you're welcome to contact me on YouTube or Twitter or wherever else. I'm pretty easy to find. Okay, where did I put this? Like, I don't even know if I have a PDF viewer in Firefox for this computer. Oh, I do. Okay, good. So here it is. So many words. Chapter 1. And it's not fancy, but it definitely looks like a novel. It definitely looks like a document. So it's certainly complete. It does become kind of like visual art as you scroll through it, right? I mean, it becomes not words, but images of words after a while. And that's an interesting balance to play with poetically, but also just as a creative thing to do with a novel. Certainly, I think Sandra's work is an example of how you can think of text as either text or as image, and both can be good, or one or the other could be good or valuable. In a conventional novel, the meaning of the words is what we're interested in. In many of the works produced for NaNoGenMo, it's the look of the words and their arrangement that forms what we're interested in. Okay, so that's a very quick intro to NaNoGenMo. I say quick because I just scratched the surface in terms of the novels that are out there and available and worth exploring. There's so many, and it's hard to even know where to start with those. So I think that's why Sandra's site is really good, introducing you to some of the works that she thought were pretty good, pretty good introductions. One of the things I hope to do with the NaNoGenMo cat is make it easier to feature or collect groups of novels, and then you can share them so that I could put that like on the homepage, like here's a set of really good examples of concrete poetry, or here's a set of really good examples of prose, and then you can like explore them that way. But at this point, that's still work in progress. I spent some time on it last night, but it's still going to take a while just to get all the data in there and then rebuild the database. So Anyway, I'm going to wrap up the stream. Thanks for watching if you did, if you are, if there is anyone out there watching. If not, that's okay too. It'll all be on YouTube later. Yeah. All right. Well, whoever you are, hope you're doing well. Have a good day.